Okay. And now, in a short while, you will hear from our regularly scheduled guest, Roberto Benes, UNICEF's Regional Director for Latin America and the Caribbean. He will join us from Haiti to brief on the situation there. And then tomorrow, we will be joined by Jean-Martin Bauer, WFP's Director of Food Security and Nutrition Analysis, who will provide an overview of WFP's report entitled A Lifeline at Risk. And we will also be joined by Ross Smith, WFP's Director of Emergency Preparedness and Response, who will focus on the 6 countries that are at most critical risk this year as a result of funding cuts. Both of our guests tomorrow will join the briefing virtually. The Secretary General is now on his way back to New York after he attended the Sharm El Sheikh Summit for ending the war in Gaza. During the conference, the Secretary General had conversations with a number of key interlocutors regarding the UN increasing its humanitarian efforts in Gaza. And on that, turning to the situation in the Gaza Strip, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tells us that since the ceasefire plan came into effect, the UN and our humanitarian partners have been able to move more freely across parts of Gaza, from which Israeli forces have withdrawn without coordination with Israeli authorities. This improved access has allowed partners to scale up the response to the most urgent needs. Yesterday, the World Health Organization said that within 24 hours of the ceasefire, an emergency medical team was deployed to Al-Ali Hospital in Gaza City, and 8 trucks carrying medical supplies entered the Strip, including insulin, lab supplies, and essential medicine. WHO teams also reached the European Gaza Hospital in Khan Yunis to retrieve cancer and other life-saving medications, as well as intensive care unit equipment, including incubators, ventilators, and patient monitors, and transferred them to Nasser Hospital, also in Khan Yunis. The UN and our humanitarian partners have also installed a solar panel for a desalination unit in Deir el-Bala, as well as new telecommunications hardware to improve connectivity for affected people and humanitarian operations. Efforts to clear debris from roads, particularly those leading to crossing points, are also underway. Since yesterday, the Israeli authorities facilitated 4 UN-led missions to collect medical, health, and shelter supplies from the Kerem Shalom and Kisufim crossings. The UN and our partners are also assessing people's needs in areas that had previously been accessible so we can adjust our response efforts. Today, an OCHA team visited one of these areas, the Al-Katiba neighborhood in Khan Yunis. They reported extensive destruction with large amounts of rubble visible throughout. Our partners have begun clearing main roads to facilitate movement and humanitarian access within the area. The UN and our partners will continue scaling up operations under our 60-day response plan to reach as many people as possible with life-saving assistance. Much more can be done, and for this to happen, as we've said, we need more crossings to open, as well as the sustained entry of fuel and cooking gas, security guarantees for convoys, basic infrastructure to be restored, protection of humanitarian workers, the facilitation of NGO access, including through ensuring they are not deregistered, and the rapid injection of funding to support humanitarian operations. And we have an update from our colleagues at the United Nations Mine Action Service on the severe threat from unexploded ordnance in Gaza. As hundreds of thousands of displaced people and humanitarian workers move through affected areas following the ceasefire, the risk of encountering these deadly remnants of war is high. UNMAS and its partners are working tirelessly to protect communities and stand ready to facilitate humanitarian scale-up and mitigate explosive ordnance risks. Since October 2023, UNMAS has identified more than 550 explosive ordnance items in areas they have been able to access, though the full extent of contamination in Gaza is still unknown. Partners are also delivering risk education for communities since 2023, especially children, and training humanitarian and construction workers to operate safely. Their work is critical to saving lives and enabling aid to reach those in need. Additionally, explosive ordnance disposal officers evaluate debris along roads and within damaged buildings to determine whether areas are safe to clear. Their guidance and technical expertise are crucial for mitigating explosive ordnance risks during these high-risk operations. On the humanitarian front, our colleagues from OCHA warned that with fewer than 3 months left in the year, our appeal to meet global humanitarian needs in 2025 is less than a quarter funded. As of the end of September, just 21%, or nearly $9.6 billion, of the more than $45.3 billion needed to support life-saving action around the world this year has been received. This is a staggering decrease of over 40% compared to the same time last year. OCHA stresses that these funding gaps are having devastating consequences for millions, leaving people without health care, families without food, and children without education. In Afghanistan, more than 420 health facilities have closed this year, forcing 3 million people to go without critical care. In Somalia, food aid had to be slashed, meaning that only 350,000 people will receive support in November, compared to 1.1 million people in August. And in Bangladesh, 500,000 Rohingya refugee children have lost access to education in Cox's Bazar. We and our partners are doing all we can to reach as many vulnerable people as possible with the limited funding available. You'll recall that in June, OCHA launched a hyper-prioritized global appeal within this year's broader global humanitarian overview, a plan that aims to meet the most urgent needs of 114 million people. OCHA also calls on donors to step up their investment in humanitarian aid. At a time when global needs are immense, more support is critical to saving lives. Moving to Ukraine, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that a UN humanitarian convoy came under attack today in the Kherson region while delivering medicine, hygiene items, and shelter materials to the frontline town of Bilozerka. The town, heavily impacted by the war, had not received assistance for months. The interagency convoy of 4 humanitarian trucks, clearly marked and led by OCHA, was hit by drones while offloading supplies, with 2 WFP trucks set on fire. Luckily, no humanitarian workers were injured. The resident and humanitarian coordinator for Ukraine, Matej Shmale, condemned the attack by the Russian Federation Armed Forces, stressing that such attacks are a gross violation of international humanitarian law. Meanwhile, authorities report that hostilities yesterday killed 5 civilians and injured nearly 30 others nationwide. The heaviest impact was recorded in Kharkiv, Donetsk, and Kherson regions, where homes, a hospital, and a church were damaged. Evacuations of children from frontline areas continue, with more than 200 people, including 40 children, having been moved yesterday. According to the UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission, civilian casualties rose by more than 30% in 2025 compared with last year. In September alone, 214 civilians were killed and 916 injured, mostly near the front lines in the Donetsk and Kherson regions. Short-range drones caused nearly a third of all casualties, while long-range missiles and drone strikes accounted for another 30%. Attacks on energy infrastructure increased by 15% month-on-month, including 12 incidents in the Kherson region. Moving to the situation in southern Lebanon, the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon continues to monitor and report violations of Resolution 1701 in its area of operations. Peacekeepers yesterday found an unauthorized weapons cache in Sector East, including a tunnel and bunker with a rocket launcher, rockets, and fuses. Meanwhile, UNIFIL continues to report Israeli Defense Force military presence and activities in the area of operations. Yesterday, the peacekeepers observed an Israeli battle tank firing heavy machine gun bursts and smoke shells across the blue line in the Markaba area in Sector East. Also, since yesterday, UNIFIL's Maritime Task Force has been conducting a training exercise with Lebanese Navy cadets, who will remain aboard a Maritime Task Force vessel until the end of the week, enhancing their skills in carrying out maritime operations. The Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, is in Brasilia, Brazil, to attend the preparatory ministerial meeting for the 30th session of the Conference of the Parties, or COP30. In her opening remarks, the Deputy Secretary General acknowledged the potential of nationally determined contributions as engines of climate-smart development and growth, but warned that current commitments remain insufficient to keep global warming below the 1.5-degree threshold. Looking ahead to COP30, she emphasized that climate adaptation must be central to the outcome, including support for national plans, prioritization of public finance for adaptation, particularly for least developed countries and small island developing states, and scaling up innovative solutions. She underscored that climate action must become the defining driver of sustainable development in this decade. At pre-COP, the Deputy Secretary General will meet with heads of delegation from negotiating parties and senior Brazilian government officials. Discussions will focus on nationally determined contributions, preparations for COP30, and strengthening cooperation between countries and the United Nations on climate action. She is expected to return to New York tomorrow. Hannah Tete, the Secretary General's Special Representative for Libya, briefed the Security Council this morning on the UN-facilitated political roadmap, which aims to unify Libya's state institutions, preserve and strengthen the unity of the country, as well as renew their legitimacy through presidential and legislative elections. She told council members that Libya cannot afford continued delays or disruptions in the completion of the roadmap. She called on all Libyan leaders to engage constructively in their efforts to ensure that the first steps in the roadmap are completed to allow for the preparations toward elections. Ms. Tete encouraged Libyan leaders to work with the UN mission, UNSMIL, which is ready for discussion and constructive engagement to achieve the stated objectives of the roadmap. Should UNSMIL's current engagement fail to reach sufficient consensus to move forward with the roadmap implementation, the mission will adopt an alternative approach and seek the support of the Security Council to advance the Libyan political transition to reach a meaningful conclusion. Our peacekeeping colleagues in the Democratic Republic of the Congo welcome the signing of the joint verification mechanism on the 14th of October 2025, in other words, today, in Doha by representatives of the government of the Democratic Republic of the Congo and the Alliance Fleuve Congo movement of March 23. This development marks a significant step forward in efforts to de-escalate tensions and advance the peace process in eastern DRC. Facilitated by the state of Qatar with the support of the United States and the African Union, the mechanism aims to ensure compliance with the ceasefire and to create conditions conducive to addressing the root causes of the conflict through inclusive dialogue. MONUSCO commends the spirit of cooperation and mutual commitment demonstrated by the parties and underscores the importance of constructive engagement to restore lasting peace and stability in the region. The mission also welcomes the call for broad-based support from the Congolese people, civil society, religious leaders, and the media to amplify messages of peace, reconciliation, and hope. The mission urges all stakeholders to seize this opportunity to advance the peace process, with the protection of civilians remaining central to all efforts. So are there any questions for me before we get to our guests? Yes, Edie.
Thank you, Farhan. A couple of follow-ups. First, are there any figures on the number of trucks that entered Gaza on Monday? We got the Sunday figure, but not the Monday figure.
So what we can say is that COGAT informed us that 817 trucks were offloaded in Gaza on Sunday. We don't have a figure for Monday. As far as we know, and as I believe Olga just told you, we can confirm that crossings are not open today for the entry of supplies from the Israeli side, but we are collecting supplies from within Gaza today.
Secondly, on the convoy that was attacked in Ukraine, you said the trucks were hit by drones. Were any of the supplies salvageable?
I will need to check and make sure. As far as I know, not all the supplies were lost. And like I said, none of the aid workers was injured, which we are thankful for.
And thirdly, Israel is reportedly cutting in half the amount of aid entering Gaza because of the slow release of the bodies of hostages. Does the United Nations have any comment on that?
Well, we've seen the formal communication from COGAT. And I would echo what Olga just said, but we encourage all parties to adhere to the parameters and agreements set out in the ceasefire. We hope the remains of all deceased hostages will be returned and that the implementation of the ceasefire agreement will move forward. Deji?
A couple of follow-ups as well. First, Secretary General was in Egypt. He met with world leaders. Can you give us more details? You just said like one or two sentences just now.
Yes, I know that one of the things you were asking about is whether he met with President Trump, and yes, that was one of the world leaders he did meet with. But he met with a number of them and did discuss, like I said, our humanitarian efforts in Gaza.
Just humanitarian efforts in Gaza. No other things. No two-state solution. No others.
I'm sure other topics came up, but that was the basic point of what he was talking about.
What is the reaction from the Secretary General in that peace summit that Israel as well as Hamas were not there?
The Secretary General appreciates the efforts by those who are attending to move forward in terms of assistance for the people of Gaza, to move forward in making sure that the ceasefire is a lasting one, and he appreciates all of these as steps forward towards the progress on a two-state solution.
Yeah, one last question. This question is not concerning Gaza. Madagascar's military announced that they have already taken charge of that country, and after the president fled abroad. Any comments from the Secretary General on the latest development in Madagascar?
Well, certainly we would be concerned about any unconstitutional change of power in Madagascar, but we'll continue to monitor the developments there. The Secretary General, as you know, has called on all Malagasy stakeholders to work together to reach a peaceful settlement to the ongoing crisis and its root causes. Lenka.
Thank you, Farhan. A follow-up on Deji's question. Was Ukraine discussed between President Trump and Secretary General?
I'm not aware of whether that came up. I'll have to wait for our colleague Stefan to come back.
And one more question, unrelated. Today, American activist Charlie Kirk would be 32 years old, and he will be awarded the Medal of Freedom. How does the UN view, what would you think should be implemented so that this violence against such people doesn't repeat? And do you honor such political leaders? Thank you.
Well, all I can really say on that, beyond what we already said at the time of his killing, is that we stand against any sort of political violence in this country, or indeed anywhere. Islam?
Thank you, Farhan. According to the reports, since the ceasefire has begun, Israel soldiers has killed at least 9 Palestinians who were trying to return their home in northern Gaza. Do you have any reaction to that? Do you have any concern about the violation of ceasefire?
Well, as I just told Edie, we want all parties to adhere to the parameters and agreements set out in the ceasefire, and we believe that they should do that. And of course, we stand for the right of all people to be able to return to their homes. Gabriel.
Thank you, Farhan. I just want to make sure I understand this letter from COGAT to make sure I have all the facts correct. The UN received this letter from COGAT, correct?
Yes.
And when did it receive it?
I believe it was today. Olga commented on this at the start of the briefing.
Yeah, it's just I wanted to clarify to make sure that I understood correctly. And it's the UN's understanding that as of Wednesday, Israel will cut in half the number of aid trucks allowed into Gaza. Is that your understanding?
We are aware of what COGAT has said. We certainly want as much aid as possible to go in. And like I said, we're asking all of the parties to adhere to their agreements so that both the deceased hostages will be returned and that the other aspects of the implementation of the ceasefire, including regarding humanitarian aid, will be followed.
And the border crossings being closed by Israel today, does that have to do with the letter or is that separate as far as you know?
You would have to ask the Israelis. Yes.
Farhan,
please.
thanks. Just back to Madagascar. I note your statement. You talked about the peaceful and consensual solutions that the SG is urging stakeholders to take. There have been major developments in the last 24 hours. The president has fled the country. The military is asserting itself, having taken control. There's a coup underway in Madagascar. Can your statement align with the developments on the ground?
Well, we're trying to see exactly what happens once the dust is settled. Obviously, if there is a coup underway, we would stand against that. We're concerned about any unconstitutional changes of power. From our standpoint as the UN, we're ready to collaborate with Madagascar, along with the African Union and the Southern African Development Corporation, for the restoration of peace and stability in the country. Yes, please, Alex.
Thanks, Farhan. I have a quick follow-up on Ukraine. You said that UN convoy was attacked by Russian drones. Have you been in touch with the Russian side on that?
I believe our colleagues on the ground are in touch. Matthias Schmale put out a statement on this, and I would refer you to what he said, but he is also reaching out to the authorities on the ground.